What frustrates me about this misuse of the terms porn addiction and sex addiction, it's not me saying that people don't have problems with these things. They absolutely do. I would be lying if I was pretending that that's not a thing or there's not some kind of population that does suffer from this. But you're actually doing those people such a disservice if you're saying that it's one thing when it's really this other thing that needs to be healed and addressed. Because if you're saying, oh, well, it's as simple as just not watching the porn, I feel like, and you can speak to this because you're the professional in the room, but if you just simply say it's just a sex problem and you get rid of the sex, or it's just a porn problem and get rid of the porn, it's going to mutate into something else.
That's right. That's beautifully said. And that's a great actually soundbite for some of the work I try to do, which is anything that's deemed to be an addiction, you want to ask, what's the deeper wound, right? That is getting played out. What is the deeper wound within which they're turning to shopping over use of exercise or sexuality? And you're correct. If we don't go deeper and figure out what they're turning to those things as a way to heal or avoid, it will get placed onto another process. And that's what you'll see happen, unfortunately, in drug and alcohol recovery and quote unquote sex addiction recovery. They are maybe abstinent from drugs and alcohol. They're maybe no longer engaging in that problematic sex, but it gets transferred onto food or shopping or gambling or something else. And this person feels healthy because they're no longer using drugs and alcohol or sex problematically, but it's just now pushed onto something else.
So if you have somebody that is spending, let's say, 8 hours a day watching pornography, they're avoiding their family or their spouse, their responsibilities, where, like, I guess, what are actionable steps for this person to try to live in a healthier way?
Yeah, I love that question. I turn to the word mindfulness, asking yourself, in the moment where I feel compelled to turn to whatever this thing is for me, and in this example, sex, what need are you trying to get met? And then the second question is there another way in which you can get that need met that might have no longer term negative consequences or problems tied to it? So I'll tell clients when they're working on more mindful porn use or masturbation, before you turn to it, say to yourself, am I horny? Am I bored? Am I lonely? If you're horny, great. That's a healthy use of that. It's a sexual outlet. If you're bored, maybe try to find some other way to engage yourself and stimulate yourself. Not because it's wrong to sometimes use sex or porn, but I want people to have a full range of coping mechanisms, right? That fluidity, that flexibility, that's a sign of health. Biologically, neurologically, sexually, options, choices. If you only have one thing to turn to, you don't have choice. That's rigidity. That's not health.
And super fragile, yeah.
100%. So ask yourself, like, what is this moment about? What got triggered? What am I turning to this to do? And like I said, if it's horniness, great. Just like if you're hungry, turn to food. But if you're bored or you're lonely or something else, find another way to maybe meet that need.
I entirely agree. I don't know how this came into my mind, but the topic of incels. So the topic, I know it popped in. So I'm like, I gotta take it. So there's this idea that there's always been a population of usually younger men that weren't able to partner up for some reason. They don't have a sexual outlet. And without that sexual outlet, they became very destructive. So what a lot of these countries would do, this is back in the day, is they would send them to war. So a lot of these Vikings, it's suggested, weren't like these big, sexy guys that had everything that they wanted. They were actually the problematic men that weren't being able to partner up. So they would actually channel that sexual energy and rage in a useful way, which was war and conquering. So now we have this group of men that still exists, and it's like, what do you do with them? And you see them online. It's very, at least in my space, they are
I'm
online.
Sure you do.
It's unavoidable.
And I'm sorry you do.
And what's so funny and what I find to be such a, like, just an oxymoron is a lot of people blame porn for them. So we're pretending that they didn't exist before. So we're saying the reason that they're not able to couple up or have sexual access is because they're spending too much time on porn. But then if they don't have access, like a sexual outlet, that they become more violent. So then it's like, if you take away the porn, isn't that going to be more of a problem? So have you seen a connection between involuntary celibacy and porn consumption, or do you think that group has kind of always existed?
So before I answer that, let me go back to the connection between what you just posed and what we just talked about, because I think it's, again, not looking at the real wound, right? And blaming the manifestation or the form of coping for that wound, right? It's not that porn causes the problem. It's that people who have certain problems turn to porn. And this group specifically, who doesn't have the access they think they deserve to females or specific females, then turn to porn because that's where they do, right? So it's like, you can't blame where they go for solution as having created the problem. That's their attempt to solve that problem. But pose your question to me again. The forced celibacy.
Yeah. So incel is involuntary celibacy, right? So
right.
it tends to be this group of men that just don't have access to women
Which
for some
is
reason.
A question itself in there. Involuntary celibacy. I would want someone to ask themselves, why is that?
Mm-hmm.
Why have I been unable to find connection and sexuality out in the world? Mm-hmm. And it isn't because of women. And I want people to do that internal work. Which this group does
blame women.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And I want them to do the internal work of why am I unable to make meaningful connections that can lead to sexuality? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's where mental health comes in. Mm-hmm. I think mental health is relational health. And I think it's in our relationships and our relational struggles that we really see where our work is. Mm-hmm. Right? What a beautiful mirror.
Yeah.
Every time someone upsets us or triggers us or there's an issue in our relationship,
I
look at yourself.
loved that part of your talk. So you were like, if you feel triggered.
People hate this.
If you feel triggered, it is not on the person that triggered
That's
you.
right.
It is for your job to go inside and say, hey, why am I being triggered? And you do the work. It's not my job to not trigger you. It's your job not to be triggered.
The
I was
problem's
like,
not the
finally
trigger.
someone saying that.
Yeah, and I think this topic really very much aligns with that. Mm-hmm. Go inside and ask yourself, why was that specifically disruptive to me before I point the finger at that which disrupted me? Mm-hmm. Because ideally, you learn to be less triggerable. Mm-hmm. We can't live in a world where we're trying to remove every trigger. There's going to be sharp objects that you're going to bump into. Mm-hmm. And healthy people go inside first. And so whenever I talk about sexuality publicly, I pose that because I know it's going to throw a lot of people off because I say some things that are a little innovative, punchy, because I want people to really think, and I really want people to walk away transformed from my work. Mm-hmm. And so with, the audience being so vast, there's going to be some triggers for people, and I want them to turn inside, and I want them, people that are involuntarily forced into, celibacy to also ask themselves, how has that come to be? Mm-hmm. And are there other areas in my life that might align with some of this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think once someone gets stuck in this blame victim loophole, it's very hard to get out of. And that energy is palpable. So if you have someone that is just so angry and blames everyone else for their situation, like you can feel that. And then it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point.
And then when you surround yourself with others in the same situation, you amplify and you feed it. Mm-hmm. And that is even more dangerous and destructive.
Right. So if you find yourself in that community, I would say exit very quickly.
That's right.